Are now
Mandy's a
recording.
co-host. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It is February 20th, 2025. This is a regular meeting of the Community Resources Committee of the Town Council. It is a virtual meeting pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public is possible, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. We are on item 1. So I'm going to go around, see if everyone can hear us. We'll start with Pat DeAngelis. Sorry, Pat, sorry to pick on you.
Present.
Sorry. Present. Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Counselor Haneke.
Present.
And Jennifer Taub.
Yes, here.
Hi,
Great. So we're
Grandma.
here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. The bags to show for it.
It's a good thing.
There are no public hearings today. We finished with U Drive, which is a great accomplishment. And I'm looking to the audience. There are no attendees for general public comments. I did add to the agenda, if people are interested in making comments on the solar bylaw, that actually I don't see it in this agenda. It must be for the 27th. So this is the opportunity for public comment, and I see no attendees. So we can move right into item 4, which is action items. And after how many months, we actually, I think, are going to get to talk about Chris's report to the CRC. So would like to open the floor to that. I think as background, I think for Kathy, we asked that we had quite a discussion early on in our review of this bylaw to understand if we should separate the whole thing into different parts and include submittals and requirements as part of ZBA and or planning board requirements instead of having it a self-contained bylaw. And it was determined, and with Chris's research here, I'll let her go through it, but it feels pretty much like we want to keep this contained within the solar bylaw itself, as many of the items are pretty specific to this kind of construction and development. Chris, do you want to walk us through this?
Sure. I'm not muted, am I? No. Okay.
Nope.
So I wrote a memo to the CRC back in December, and I think you should all have access to that memo. I think it's in your packets. And it's essentially saying that I reviewed the rules and regulations of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the rules and regulations of the Planning Board with regard to submittal requirements, and then looked at the submittal requirements that we had included in the solar bylaw and compared them, and came to the conclusion that it was probably a good idea to leave the submittal requirements in the solar bylaw and make reference to the fact that the Zoning Board of Appeals and Planning Board also have submittal requirements, but they're a little bit less definitive or particular detailed than what we have here in the solar bylaw. So what I want to do is, first of all, I'd like to apologize for an error in my memo to you, and it's in the 3rd paragraph, and I had made reference to the exact pages in the ZBA rules and regs and the planning board rules and regs. I had gotten them reversed, so that may have caused some confusion, and I apologize for that. So why don't we just start in, and the effort was, looking for duplications and redundancies, but as I said, I think that we should keep the submittal requirements in this solar bylaw. So the first paragraph,
Excuse me just a minute. I'm going to interrupt. I think last time as we started on this, we were going to have the actual solar document, the bylaw document up, and then we
Yeah.
could talk about each of these pertaining to your memo, but with the basic wording up.
so
And
since I have a failure at sharing my screen, I wonder if either Stephanie or Counselor Haneke or
Would you like
someone
me
else.
to share the current version?
that would be great if you want to do that. Mandy, do you also
Please.
want to take notes if we adopt something, we put it in?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. But I think if we're doing that, we need to talk about everything that Pam added before without conversation at CRC too. So I think we either need to make a note of that or, you know, go through them for that too.
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
concerned that it's a version that has ads in it that we haven't talked about when none of our other counselors have the ability to do that and put it in the packet.
Pat. You're muted.
Kathy had her hand up first.
Oh, okay, Kathy, thanks.
Sorry, as everyone here knows, I'm a newcomer. So the other thing that I would request, what I would add to second what Mandy just said, is I find this document almost impossible to read. Because I'm not sure where the comment has already been addressed, what things have been deleted, what things have been added, or what things are potential adds. So maybe at the end of when we go through with Chris, we could have a quick review of this. And I am more than willing as a newcomer to take on whatever we want to do. So that was comment number one. Second, as we go through Chris's comments, I would prefer that we do them in comment boxes. So we don't just try to change the language while we are working on it, Pam, because that's where, I mean, some of this is this precise wording as opposed to Chris has got some delete these, add these, just cross-reference. Because then the document's already messy, so I can tolerate comment boxes, but trying to add. So those are just my two requests. I couldn't decide whether I should accept all the edits and do a clean version. And then I realized there were some things that were alternative wording. So maybe we can address that. But Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just meant, to get it clean enough so I can read it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It is a mess. Pat.
Yeah, I have a similar comment. I agree with Mandy that we need to go through the whole document because there are lots of additions and deletions that we have not agreed on. But I would like very much, let's just get one thing done, which is let's look at the submittal requirements before we go back and try to look at anything else. It just feels like let's do that, not start at the beginning. Right now, yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm looking at Counselor Haneke. If you would like to add it as a comment. I have trouble with the little bubble boxes, but anyway, that's right. Okay, Chris Brestrup.
Okay, well,
We're
first,
starting with
starting with submittal requirements. This is currently called section 17.04, submittal requirements. I wanted to make the comment that the U Drive overlay zoning district has also taken the title of section 17. So we're going to have to change or revise the section number or article number for this, but we can put that aside for now. In any event, I think I'm making the request or recommendation that the first paragraph of submittal requirements where it says, in addition to the requirements listed in the PGA, that's the Permit Granting Authority, rules and regulations, the following information shall be submitted as part of the application. I would like to recommend changing that to say, In addition to the submittal requirements listed below, the applicants are encouraged to review the application and submittal requirements in the rules and regulations of the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, whichever is applicable. Because I think that makes it clearer that these are the requirements that are governing, but it's also a good idea to go back and look at the rules and regs of the planning board and the ZBA. I don't think there's going to be a conflict. And I think that this list is much more comprehensive, and the lists that are in the rules and regs are more minimal.
Counselor Haneke.
I'll make that change, but I have a question about it. Encouraged to review the application and submittal requirements. It's my understanding that the applicable PGA's regulations must be followed too. So I guess I question the wording, applicants are encouraged to review, because that doesn't seem to indicate they have to submit that too. So are we not requiring them to submit the PGA's regulations submittal requirements and only these, or do they have to do both? Because this language to me is unclear as to whether they have to do both.
I understand what
Chris.
you're saying, and I think that the language that I've suggested could be modified to make it clearer that they need to do both. But I think that this list does encompass everything that's in the rules and regulations of the planning board and the ZBA. So we could say are also required to follow the application submittal requirements, or whatever wording you think is appropriate.
Mandy, could you see if you can enlarge the text as much as you possibly can?
Give me a second.
Yep, thank you. Jennifer, while she's doing that.
Yeah, now I'm sure an applicant would know the answer to this. I just don't. I guess I'm not clear on it. When we say that they should look at the ZBA or planning board, whichever are applicable, they should look at both, because they wouldn't necessarily know which is applicable?
By the time they get to this point, they would know. They would know.
They
whether
would, okay.
For a special permit with the zoning board of appeals.
I see. They would, right, okay. Thank you.
So I have another
And
question
we,
to follow up
hang
on
on.
that one.
Pat,
Okay.
hold on, just a second, Pat, and then Counselor
Oh,
Haneke.
sorry.
I was just
can't
gonna
see.
say, can't we change the applicants are required to review and just get rid of the encouraged?
Review and follow, or review and.
Encouraged to review and follow.
Comply with, yeah.
So my question would be, following up on Jennifer's, in the rules and regulations, I would say of the applicable PGA. Because we're trying not
Yep.
to reference a specific board.
Yep. Good.
Yep. That makes sense, yep.
Great. So in addition to the submittal requirements listed below, applicants are required to comply with the submittal requirements in the rules and regulations of the applicable PGA. Great. So in this case, Kathy, we are correcting the wording, and we're not putting
I
a little.
don't mind this kind of work. I mean, this is very specific as opposed to alternatives. I'm fine with this, and particularly focused on this section. And
Okay.
it's not redlined. It's actually, we should be accepting this. So
Great. Chris.
So it is red line because I'm tracking all changes, but what I can do at the end of this is create a better version that it has accepted the changes made during each of the meetings. So in this section, it would be the changes made after this meeting, it would be the submittal ones, but I can clean up the prior sections too, so that there are, so that when we've discussed it in a meeting and made a change, that shows up as accepted.
That's fine with me. It was more the commentary that went along and alternatives that I found difficult. Yeah.
Okay, Chris, back to Chris.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about item number 1. And item number 1 has to do with the existing conditions plan, which shows on a plan what exists on the site prior to anything being proposed. So I think this is a good list. However, what did I say? Keep all of the items on the list. And this number 1 should, it provides a good checklist for the applicant in one place, even though some of the items may be redundant with rules and regs. For the first bullet, though, where it says for the project site, based on a ground-based survey, I'd like to add the words
Stamped and signed.
stamped and signed by a registered land surveyor licensed to practice in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Okay.
Any discussion on that? Good.
I don't have discussions on that. I have discussions on some of the red stuff and what Pam did
But
just
can I
include
just
in
ask-
this.
Yep.
But Chris, don't you mean that, so it has to have this and that includes, and then the list?
Well, the existing conditions plan should be based on a survey. And the survey should not just be based on aerial photography or our GIS, system. It should be based on something that's actually done on the ground. It could be partially based on GIS, but it has to be ground truthed by a registered land surveyor. So does that answer your question? I mean, all of these things that are bulleted here are going to be put on to this existing conditions plan, but the plan has to be created to begin with, so you can put all those things on it.
Chris, would it feel better to you for an existing, I mean, the title of this plan or sheet is existing conditions. If we included that bullet into the title as an existing conditions plan based on a ground-based survey stamped and signed, is that too much of a burden for that first item? The first item is a existing conditions plan.
I think the existing conditions plan is going to include all of these bulleted items
Yeah,
that are listed down below. So I think listing it in a simple way, such as either existing conditions or existing conditions plan. Either
Okay.
one of
So
those.
we won't try to put that bullet up into the number 1.
I don't think so.
Okay.
All right, and then it has obviously property lines, any physical features that are found, topography. And we did make mention here, this is something that Pam added based on a prior discussion, that we should identify areas of greater than 15% slope. The reason for that is because we've made a requirement later on in the solar bylaw saying that the solar installations should not be put onto slopes that are greater than 15%. So we have to know where those 15% areas are. And then characteristics and extent of land cover. That makes sense. Either we can outline a bubble that says wooded area, and then another area that would say pasture, and another area that might say, bare earth or something like that. But you want to know what is kind of there on the ground. And then the next one is E, wetlands, vernal pools, and floodplains. And that would be information that would be relevant to both the permit granting authority that we're talking about here, but also to the Conservation Commission. Then we also want to see public roads and abutting scenic roads and byways and farm roads or other roads that are actually existing on the property. And then this item G, I think we could delete because we've already put it into item C above.
I would agree. Mandy,
Yeah, so the question is, Pam put it in C without talking to us when it was already in G. But is it better in C, or is topography different than slopes greater than 15%? Is number one. And number two, with vernal pools, the addition of that by Pam, are vernal pools already mapped, or do you have to map them on your own? And if so, can you map them at any time of year? Or is the inclusion of vernal pools on this requirement basically limiting to how long it takes someone to apply because they have to wait to a certain time of year to map the vernal pool before they can actually submit their application?
Chris,
So I think in the answer to the first question, you could leave out the red writing that's part of item C and just include what's part of item G. The two things are related, but by putting a separate item in item G, it calls attention to it. So that would be a reason for having it in G. But I can see arguments in both ways because it is related to topography. With regard to vernal pools are actually a wetland resource area that would be encompassed within the word wetlands. So if you're mapping wetlands, you would ordinarily map vernal pools. Although Councillor Haneke is right that you can only map vernal pools at certain times of the year. So if you're going to submit something in November, maybe you'd have to wait till the following spring to actually map the vernal pools. So you could leave vernal pools out because they're encompassed within wetland resources areas.
Pat, and then I have a question.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, if someone is submitting an application in November, they could have been doing all this mapping and everything months before then. Is that true? So I don't think the vernal pool being listed there stops anything. I don't know. So I'd like to keep it in, but I'm not gonna, but
They're going to have to put it in eventually because the Conservation Commission is going to
wants it, yeah.
Oh, well, then we probably should add it to the list of what they should expect and not surprise them later. I have a question or thought about item C. Chris, would you typically have them submit basically a 2-foot contour or a 1-foot contour plan? Would it make sense to highlight those areas that are 15% or greater at that time, or make it a separate sheet saying, go back to that grading plan, that topography, and now I highlight and identify the 15% areas?
You often see sort of two different maps that are presented. One would be all the topography, including these other things that we're talking about, and then a separate map that would show specifically what areas are at what percent. So that would be a way of displaying that information. It wouldn't all have to be on the existing conditions plan, but it would need to be submitted to the PGA as part of the application process.
Great. So I'm very comfortable taking it out of C then and leaving G.
Okay.
You want to just like erase it? How do folks feel about vernal pools? If it's one of the categories within wetlands, will it be more
I think
restrictive?
that should be kept.
I would
agree.
say, I'm not gonna fall on this sword, but if it's duplicative, I would rather keep the larger category than call out the smaller category too, but I'm not.
Well, I'm defer
that.
to the Conservation Commission who wants it in.
Well, I'm not sure they want it in. I think Pam asked for it to be in. The Conservation Commission will make sure it's mapped. There's a difference between them asking for it to come in and one of us asking for it to come in.
Stephanie.
The Conservation Commission is definitely going to have their own process. I don't think, and I have to concur with Counselor Henneke that they're not gonna look to these regulations governing vernal pools. It has to go through them if there are vernal pools. So, I think, they would ensure that they're identified. They would have to be.
Stephanie, so the question might be if this, you hand them the checklist, here's the checklist and an existing plan. If we, I understand it's a type of wetland in a sense. Does it not make sense though to just remind them that not only must they do X, they have to do Y and Z, and that they're going to bump into it again at some other point if they're putting their packages together. They're going to do all of this before it even goes to the conservation and wetland administrator, right?
Right. Well, so, oops, sorry, my
Yeah.
speaker's doing a weird thing in the background. I would say that, vernal pools and floodplains are part of our wetlands. So it's sort of, to me, in some ways, a bit redundant to have wetlands, vernal pools and floodplains. They are wetlands. So I think if you're going to keep wetlands in there, it's maybe sufficient to just say that. I don't understand that, adding those two separate specific regulatory jurisdictional areas, calling them out versus bordering vegetated wetland, I think you should just say wetlands. If you're going to keep wetlands, then I would say wetlands, and I don't think you need to call those out.
That makes some sense, and it's not a sword I want to die on either. So if it is all inclusive and the Conservation Commission is aware of the department is, and everyone involved is, then let's keep it simple. So sorry to agree with you, Mandy.
So we'll strike those two add-ons. Okay, back to Chris. Unless there are other comments on A through G.
No,
I didn't put any more in my memo, but we haven't really discussed this list, so I think it's worth going through all
Okay,
of the
good.
things, right?
yeah, and I'm sorry, I have some questions. The red, Pam, you added after the last time we discussed the minimal requirements, but this parentheses that has crossouts that are not track changes, Pam, did you cross all of those out too, or is
No. Well, we might have crossed those out because they were getting bumped up to item number 1.
Well, this is number, I mean, it's not from 26, so I just don't understand where that came from, but maybe that, yeah, okay. So all of these should be crossed out, the parenthetical.
Well,
from
wait a minute.
26?
It's been since November. Item number 26, if we quickly look at what number 26 is. That was moved to number 2, locations of natural cultural resources, active farmland,
So you
farmland
moved
soils.
that to number 2 after we
Yeah.
last discussed it.
Yeah. But it doesn't look like we adopted them and put them in as bullets for number 2. It just that we moved it there.
Well, no, your red says moved, so I'm wondering whether you moved it there. I don't know.
Yes.
Stephanie said move it up to 3. So I wonder if we've got duplicates with that. Here, give me a.
3 is something different. We're talking about existing conditions.
Well, let's, when we get down to those, let's go through them one by one and see if they are in fact existing conditions requirements. Pat.
This is problematic if anybody on the committee
Yeah.
move something after a meeting. And I
Yeah.
think that's a lesson for all of us.
Yes. And if it was me, it was based on the discussion that we'd had and the notes that were taken, but not like typed in as we did it, I think. That's my only recollection. So let's keep going. We finished G. Now we're looking at abutting land uses, locations of structures and inventoried historic properties. Zoning
Okay, what-
districts.
Yeah, I think
Pat.
abutting land uses are important because the ZBA may want to know how close are these panels going to be to that residential use? Or how close is it going to be to that gas station or whatever the abutting land use happens to be? It might have an influence on whether the ZBA says, oh, I think there should be some more screening in this location, or we should, move the setback back 10 feet or something like that. So I think abutting land uses are important. And then we have location of structures, inventory, historical buildings. Some of this is starting to, on property and within 300 feet of the site as available from the Amherst, Town of Amherst GIS viewer. So I think all of that is important, and it's information that usually does get captured on an existing conditions plan.
I just have a quick question, Chris. I think it's it should be there. Does a historical, where is it now? I'm getting lost. Historic building inventory, location of structures, where would we put in about an indigenous burial ground? I don't think we have any, but something like indigenous burial grounds. This is just for my own information, I don't have something to add.
We
So-
usually don't map those because they're considered to be sacred, and we don't want members of the public or anybody else to go ransacking them. So they're usually kept kind of quiet.
Okay. So what would happen if they were in a plan, somebody doesn't know it's there and that's part of their plan to,
Yeah, I think that this information needs to be submitted to the state. And
gotcha.
unfortunately, I'm not the most cognizant of exactly what that process is. I think if Nate were here, he would know.
Mhm.
But it does get
Okay.
submitted to the state at
Yeah.
some point, so the state can look at it and say, oh, we know about something that's going on there, you better be careful. And
Okay.
I'm not clear on exactly what that process is.
Okay, thank you. And I might email Nate. I'm just really curious about it. But thank you for that clarification.
All right, zoning districts. We don't necessarily have to have zoning districts on the plan because it would be included in the application. However, if there is more than one zoning district on a plan, it's usually helpful. Excuse me, if there's more than one zoning district on a property, it's usually helpful to have them shown on the existing conditions map, because then you know where does one zoning district end and the other one begin. So I would leave zoning districts in here. But you could argue not to have them in there, and the ZBA or planning board PGA could ask to have those mapped separately. I think it's a good idea to leave them in here, though.
Mandy?
So I thought we nixed zoning districts in here because both PGA requirements included a requirement to show the zoning districts. And so it was completely redundant here.
I think that they always require that you show the zoning district on the application form, but it's not clear that they always require the zoning districts should be shown on a map. And sometimes it does become a problem if they're not shown on the map. So eventually.
So is this asking for the zoning district of just the parcel?
Sometimes
Or
it
also
splits a
abutting
parcel.
parcels?
Well, if you just need to show it for the parcel,
Okay.
because that's where the zoning applies for that parcel. However, if that parcel is divided into RG and RN, there may be different requirements with regard to lot coverage or setbacks or different things that apply to those separate zoning districts. And so showing where one ends and one begins would be helpful.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Then this is something that we moved from another location, active farmland and prime farmland soils and farmland soils of statewide importance. I think we moved that from something that was further down the line.
It
didn't we?
was
Yeah.
in 26 that I think Pam wanted to move up here, but the last time we talked, we left in 26.
But
Oh,
we haven't eliminated
haven't.
26 yet, right?
okay. So do you want to make a decision about that now?
I mean, we have to make a decision about 26, which had a lot of, it had a lot of duplicates, right? Many of the things, I think many of them got moved up and the other ones didn't after our discussion. It's been so long since we discussed, right?
So I see on the old 26 was the wetlands and vernal pools, which we just,
And
you know,
floodplains
and
and
the
yeah,
floodplains, right, right.
the wellhead areas.
So these were in a sense, it was looking at all of these different requirements, and they made much more sense to be included in that first pass of existing conditions. So I'd love to keep going on those, but let's finish up above that.
So we're going back to
Pam and everyone, I put my hand up, but I don't know whether you see
Sorry,
it.
yeah, Kathy.
I think keep going is right, and then once we get through this whole section, we can look at if something should move someplace else. I wouldn't worry about where it should be right now, if the lists are questions on what 26 is, particularly for me, just going through, the item should be somewhere. We identify it, and then we could look at later whether the organization doesn't make sense. So
Great.
just going
Good
through
idea.
each
Yep.
item right now makes sense to me.
Great. Okay, we're on active farmland and prime farmland soils and farmland soils of statewide importance.
So I think it's a good idea to map those things because later on we talk about protecting farmland soils.
So we don't have a definition for active farmland, but we have prime farmland and soils and farmlands of statewide importance. It's really hard for a landowner to necessarily know if an abutting area is active or not, especially who knows, right? And what's considered active.
Can you
I
go
gonna
would
back?
get rid of
I'm gonna
active
look for
farmland.
Stephanie, or I'm gonna look for Stephanie or even Dave to react to that. I would know what an active farmland is, because I
Well,
grew up on a
But
farm,
I
but
would stick to the definitions. Prime farmland doesn't include soil in our definitions. I would stick to how we've defined them. So prime farmland and soils of state, I don't know whether it's, I think it's just soils of statewide importance up in the definition.
Mhm. An active farmland, I understand, is farmland that's been farmed in the last 2 years, but I would look to Dave or Stephanie to confirm that.
I can say that under the wetlands regulations, for agricultural definition, it would be land that's been farmed within the last 5 years.
5 years, okay.
So doesn't that seem that it should be there and get added to definition?
I guess my question is, how does a landowner know if the next door landowner has farmed it in the last 5 years, if they've
This-
bought it a year ago?
This doesn't apply to neighboring land. This only applies to the property in question.
Okay,
I would just chime in. I agree. I think putting in a definition, I think Pat and others here, definition of active farmland makes a lot of sense because it's not crystal clear. You might have a hayfield,
Mhm.
to a farmer, that's an active agriculture, but to the average person, the lay person, they might look at that and they go, they're not doing anything with that. But in
Yeah.
fact, they're baling hay for horses or whatever.
And the other thing is, it's not, this is for mapping purposes. It's not saying, oh, you can't do something here. It's just that we want to know these things.
Right, and the others are clear definitions based on the kind of soils that are there, and that's all readily available information. If not, they can go out and do soil testing for prime and statewide importance.
Okay, wellhead protection areas and surface water supply protection areas. I think surface water supply protection areas has a clear definition. And I don't know about wellhead protection, but I think it does have a clear definition, and maybe again, Dave or Stephanie could enlighten us about that.
Stephanie?
Uh, it's been a while, but I believe for wellhead protection areas, there's a certain radius of what that is, and I don't off the top of my head recall what that is.
And does that only apply to public wells, or does it apply to private wells as well?
I don't know. That seems. I
There's
don't.
a
I don't recall.
I could.
There's a
jump in here.
section that the drinking water protection group was recommending, and I think we may get to that a little bit below.
That's right, I remember that.
But I'd love to make a note of that, because I think it feels that it should be public and private, because many of the people in in the east part of town, which is more likely to be developed because it is currently less developed, would be the ones affected.
So with wells, there's zone 1 and zone 2. I don't off the top of my head know the distances. And then for surface water, there's zone A and B. So we can get those, or maybe they have been referenced later on in this document. I will say I've heard from a number of people concerned about, and that, by the way, those are just for public water supplies that I referenced, zone 1 and 2 and A and B. And I have heard from a number of residents concerns about protection of private wells and the need for this document to speak to those as well.
So this again, maybe we need to check out and get the definitions, et cetera, clarify them, but also add them to definitions. I don't believe they're there.
It'd be very easy to get those. We could get
Thank
those
you, Dave.
from Beth Wilson and the DPW engineering folks.
Mhm. Then we have permanently protected open space, and I think that's clear what that is. It's APR land, conservation land, state-owned land, and probably a number of other things. But I think we can be clear about what it is. Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, and the Biomap 3 and Critical Natural Landscape and Core Habitat. Those all have maps associated with them. So you can check to see where those are and then have the surveyor map those on the plan.
Yep.
Then soil
I
types.
have a question about that one. I'm trying to look at the definitions. Should we have we talked about, it looks like maybe we don't have them in definitions anymore. I don't want to page up for you all, so I'm looking at an old version for me.
Thank you.
But I know we did something with the Biomap 3 and all of that somewhere else in this bylaw in a previous version. If that's in definitions or something, should we just use that definition instead of these? Instead of setting everything out? Is it, instead of redefining stuff, but, so the soils and farmlands of statewide importance is defined as land designated as such by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Services Web Soil Survey Map. I guess the question is the Biomap 3 and Critical Natural Landscape and Core Habitat the same web survey soil map?
No,
Oh.
it's a different map.
Okay.
And it is a particular map, and you can look at it and then extract that information and put it on a survey.
Okay.
And I did just scroll to the definitions and I don't see any of those
Yeah.
defined.
Right.
Right.
They haven't.
We
been.
have just soils and farmlands of statewide importance per USDA
Okay.
Yeah.
and prime farmland per USDA and NRCS.
Yeah.
So I feel awkward, do we have to reference or sort of cross-reference anything that's already under the jurisdiction of, a national division?
What do you mean?
It seems to me that it doesn't hurt to have it there. I don't know. I mean, Chris, what do you think?
To have what? To have the
The
natural,
biomaps, I think Pam was referring to the biomap information. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
like what organization do we have to direct people to those organizations that maintain the biomap threes, just as we have identified where to find soil types? Stephanie.
Those are under the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. So that is where you would find those maps and they're updated. So I think similarly, you would want to have language that says the most recent.
Most recent natural heritage.
No, the most recent biomap 3.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So we use it down on what was page 11 in, at least in a prior version, in section 1706. I'm going to just, so people can see how we referred to it down there. This is how we referred to it there. So we described it as on Massachusetts GIS Biomap 3 or priority under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act,
Yeah.
not the National Heritage one.
David.
Yeah, I would, I don't mean to defer this to later, but I would love to maybe sit down and get a little guidance from Aaron Jock on this. I find it very, Mandy, I'm getting confused now. Yeah, so I find it very, it's odd that we say Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, parentheses, NESP, estimated and priority habitats, and then below it, we say soil types as found on the US. At the very least, I think we should say estimated and priority habitats, biomap 3, and critical natural landscapes and core habitat as mapped by the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. A lot of people, when they get very confused about natural heritage, thinking it's a federal program, it's a state program. And so they even switch up natural and national. So very frequent.
Mhm.
So
By the Massachusetts.
by the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. And then I get your point, Mandy. We refer to it differently down below. We then reference MISA. So I would encourage maybe Steph and Chris to talk to Aaron about consistency there. She works in that world, as did Stephanie some years ago, but Stephanie's been out of that arena for a little while. But if you could maybe consult with Aaron on the proper reference there.
That would be great. So let's table this now and we'll look for some feedback next time. That'd be great. Actually, that's next week. It'd be great if she wants to just quickly respond to that. That would be very helpful.
I can get that response and send it via email.
Okay. Perfect.
Hey, do we have any trouble with the soil types? Is that okay?
So I had a question about the soil types because we did that up top with the, where was it? The prime farmland and soils and farmland of statewide importance.
That's different.
No, we're talking, this is soil types like shaly, whatever, nice, or,
Venus
you know,
something
whatever.
or other, or Enfield, or they have all kinds of crazy names, but they're mapped by the USDA, and they don't necessarily have to do with farming. They have to, well, I guess they were originally mapped for farming purposes, but they have to do with building purposes. For instance, last night we had someone come into the, not last night, was it? Well, yes, it was last night. Come into the planning board and talk about soil types on a property in Amherst where they were going to build a building. They weren't going to farm it, but they still referred to the soil types that were there on the property. So it's something that is good to know when you're building something, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with farming.
Mhm. It's critical,
Andy?
it's critical to know, actually, yeah,
Yeah.
because of erosion factors.
Right.
Different soils erode at different rates under different conditions.
Right.
Or
That's what I was gonna say.
or compact better
Yeah.
than others. For
Okay.
instance,
I
Yeah.
deleted the parentheses because it was already in parentheses. We could actually just, actually, let me redo that. We've already defined them up in definitions as USDA.
Great. Yep.
And for my edification, can you take the yellow and red off so they?
I will once we got this done. Is it as found or as mapped on?
It's mapped
Or
on,
as identified?
yeah, identified, that's good.
I can't remember what the yellow was for in the first place anymore.
No, that's okay. I'm just, as long as I know this is language people want as opposed to are questioning.
I have to deal with the yellow later. It's not,
You can, Mary, I'm just,
yeah.
It's things to go back and look at. That's what it was intended to
Oh,
be.
okay. Well, there
Okay.
you go.
Locations of local or natural, wait a minute, National Register Historic Districts. So that's important if you're going to be removing something. I don't know if it's terribly important for installation of solar projects. I think you can leave it in or not. Somehow, if there's going to be a demolition of something, people will find out about it. They have to get a permit to demolish. So you could leave it in or take it out. It's up to you.
Where
I
are
would
we?
take it out.
Where are we? I've gotten distracted, I think. I'm sorry.
Locations of local or national register
Oh,
historic
Okay.
district.
This may apply as much to an adjoining property as it does to the property under consideration, which we've been told that we're sort of not. Well, we went back to the historic structures within 300 feet, I think, of the property. So, I don't mind keeping this in here. It clearly would show up if there was some pretty significant historic structures nearby. But it doesn't, I agree, we probably wouldn't bump into that very often. But better to keep it perhaps. Kathy.
I guess I
Are you-
disagree because up above you have a budding buildings.
Yeah.
You know, and if you actually think of what we have in Amherst for local national history, we don't have large swaths of land that someone could put a large solar complex on it in the middle of these areas. You know, the nearest one we have, and we don't really have a historic district in North Amherst, is there is some open land up there, but it's not a historic district. So I'm not sure what it adds, since you have abutting properties up above.
I'm fine with that. Anybody else?
I'm comfortable with removing it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so now we're going to move into site plans for proposals, is that right?
So I
Yes.
think we're getting
Well-
rid of this parenthetical and all of this, right? Because
Let's just double check. It looks like we've covered just about everything.
Mhm.
Yes. Yay, we're on number 2.
Okay, number 2 is site plans which are showing things that are proposed to happen to the property.
Can I just ask whether the wellhead one is up in the top list?
I
I'm
believe it is.
Right here.
fine. I don't, I'm not quick enough to cross-check. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and it's got a comment associated with it too.
Okay.
So site plans showing proposed changes to the property, including grading and proposed berms. I had a question for Councilor Rooney. I wasn't sure what she meant by proposed berms. I think grading would show berms or gullies or any change in the shape of the land. So I
Yes.
wondered why she
It
chose.
should. And I think that was just based on my visits to other solar sites, that there are often some pretty distinctive berms, mostly caused by the soil that they excavate from one area and they dump somewhere else. And when I think of, if I'm in a butter, having a 4-foot high berm along a property line means that there's that much more screening from the adjoining property. So sometimes it's very helpful to note that, but I agree that the word grading should encompass it. So I'm okay taking it off.
Okay,
Quick question for Chris,
Yes.
in my notes from going through your list of things you wanted to add some language.
oh, I did want to add a language about,
I have it here. If you,
yeah, I have it in front of me.
okay,
So
great.
after, let's see. So incorporated into site plans showing proposed changes should be language that the site plan would be based on a ground-based survey as described in item number 1 above. In other words, you have to have a base plan to which you are adding these things. So, site plans, comma, based on a ground-based survey as described in number 1 above, comma.
And you also
then-
had a second.
And then the
Condition.
second thing was,
The
the site
proposed,
plan shall, the proposed site plans shall be stamped and signed by a professional engineer licensed to practice in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Where
So
are
I
we
guess that's,
putting that?
probably after the word above. So. Yes, I think that's okay for now as a placeholder.
Yeah.
thank you.
And then the other thing is that the site plans shall contain plans of the LGPI showing the proposed layout of the system, including distance between the system and all property lines. And maybe that could be a bullet.
I think that should be a bullet. Yeah. It could be the very first bullet.
First bullet. So the first bullet would be plans of the LGPI showing the proposed layout of the system, including the distance between the system and all property lines.
Chris, would it make sense to include the word BESS here as well? Because we've done that before, LGPI and BESS.
Yeah, it has to, yeah.
Sure, yep. Mm-hmm.
Because that's often the more critical element.
Mm-hmm. Do we have that later on, Mandy?
That's what I was wondering. I'm not going to scroll here. I'm going to scroll on a prior version. I thought we had a lot of the LGPI somewhere later that talked about like,
Number 3 was drawings of the LGPI. I think when we get to 3, it's, her note was maybe deleted because it's covered in number 2.
Right.
I think that's right, yeah. So your site plan should really show the locations of these things,
Yeah.
okay? Um,
And so that it would be including Bess. Yeah, but okay, I'm sorry.
so we have grading and then information about proposed topsoil or other soil removal. I think it should have proposed topsoil or other soil removal or addition. And I think we might cover that later on also, but I would put or addition after the word removal.
Yep.
Okay, vegetation clearing, a planting plan. And these don't necessarily have to be all on the same plan. They can be on separate plans that are
Mhm.
labeled as to what they're going to be showing. Exterior lighting, including locations, type, wattage, and luminosity. Screening vegetation or
Chris,
structure.
excuse me. Oops,
Mhm.
sorry, interruption. Exterior lighting, so type, wattage, and luminosity, doesn't feel like something well, let's, when the planning board looks at something, like they looked last night at the, Amity Street development, they had a lighting plan and I forget what they call the plan, but it's got the lumens on the ground, and I don't think that would be something that would be required for the few lights at a solar, way station.
It wouldn't be important.
Do we need the luminosity and the watts and so forth, unless it's, 20-foot high beacons? Maybe we do want to know that that's what they're proposing.
Well, we do usually get the wattage.
Okay,
Luminosity is probably not that important unless we were worried about it shining over into someone else's property, but the
It is,
PGA asked for that if they thought it was important.
okay, good. Okay, good.
So we could take that word out, luminosity, if you want to.
no,
No,
What does luminosity mean?
I think it means intensity of the light measured in foot candles.
I
So
think
light
I'd
hitting
like
the
to
glass.
keep it there. It's just what Chris said. It doesn't hurt to have it there because depending on where the lighting is, it may really affect the butters. I mean, we've had those changes in other plans that the planning board has passed and stuff like that. That became an issue for different neighborhoods and if this is a farm, there could be neighboring homes. If it's a forest, there could be neighboring homes. It just depends. So I don't think it hurts to have it there. Doesn't make an extra super important requirement.
And the PGA could also grant a waiver from that requirement if they decided that it wasn't important in a particular
Yep.
case.
Good.
Okay, screening vegetation or structures. I think that means fences to screen things or hedges. Location of
Question,
signs.
just, excuse me, question on that. Screening vegetation really should be part of a planting plan. The planting plan should include the screening, I guess, is the vegetative screening. I'm fine having it in two different bullets.
You could say planting plan as it is above, including screening or including vegetative screening.
Yeah,
But what about the screening structures?
that could be separate if there are any structures. That to me is more like a fence or a.
Screening structures, yep. That works okay. Why did we take fencing out? Is that because we had a separate,
Elsewhere, I think, Chris.
But don't we want to show it on a site plan?
Yes.
I think we do.
But I think there's a whole, isn't there a whole section on fencing?
I think there is, but I think it should be, that whole section describes what type of fencing you can
Mm.
have. But I think you should actually show it on the plan because it's part of the, physical things that you're gonna be putting there.
Yes, you're right. It's under section 1705.
Yeah.
Okay. Service vehicle parking and access roads, that's fine. Stormwater management system features. And the question is that the same as number 27? However, I think you can describe the stormwater management plan, but then you actually need to show where these things are on the ground. You need to show the stormwater catchment basins, and you need to show the swales and, all the infrastructure that is necessary to support the stormwater management. So I think it's useful to have it on the site plan.
Yeah, I would say it's not the same as 27, which is just the plan. But is it system or features? I'm not sure why we went with features over systems.
I don't remember.
Okay,
You could say infrastructure. Okay, locations of
so this is
LGPI.
where I was thinking we duplicated the bullet point above.
That's right, we did.
And do we cover it all? LGPI, inverters, poles, and BESS.
So what is poles? You added that, Pam. What were you referring to?
We have had we had a conversation about typically when the power company has had to come in and put extra poles, and they're often in the public right of way, like we did that at the landfill. And we've done it a couple other places where they connect to a new BESS.
So that's the
And
interconnection thing we got rid of down here.
I don't think you should get rid of the interconnection thing, but that's, you can get rid of it here, but not later on because it's usually in the town right of way. So
Right.
I think, leaving it out of here is fine, but there are poles usually on the site or off the site that allow this to be connected to the grid. So if you're going to install poles on the site, it should be shown on the site plan. So I think it's okay to leave it here.
Great.
Mhm.
So I think
Okay,
the next one's why we had fencing deleted above.
let's see, location of all security measures and fencing. Okay, so that's why we deleted it. All right, got it. Here's something.
Oops, excuse me, can we just go right ahead right now and delete that word fencing? I know you
just
put a
did.
line through it, but
Yeah.
I guess it's the same thing, isn't it? Yeah, I just
It-
wanted to
it-
see this.
It's in track changes, so if
Yeah.
I showed you the simplified version, you wouldn't see that word.
Got it, that's right.
Okay, number and location of trees. I think we need to talk about this. You don't
Yeah.
really care what size the trees are in areas that you're not going to clear. So you need to make it clear to the applicant that you only want the locations and sizes of trees that you are going to clear. And then on the other hand, what size should we talk about? And
Mhm.
for the normal project, we usually like people to show anything that's over 6 inches or over 8 inches. And that makes sense for a site that's like the Barry Roberts site at Amity Street and University Drive. But for an area where you're going to clear 40 acres of trees, does it make sense to map locations of all of the trees that are over 12 inches? I think that's excessive. I think you should show areas of clearing rather than specific trees that are being cleared. Now, that's my opinion, but others may have a different opinion, but it just seems very overdone to map, all the trees that are over 12 inches or 8 inches or whatever in a huge area that's 40 acres or 10 acres or whatever. Do others agree with that?
I see Kathy, you have your hand up.
I guess I think it could be reworded because it doesn't actually the proposed for clearing isn't quite, so it's proposed number of trees proposed for clearing and proposed for clearing. I'm just thinking of the solar array that's up behind us in North Amherst. There were big trees, little trees, middle-sized trees, and no trees in an area. So something that gets at, how many are we talking about maybe, but I'm not sure whether you going out and measuring them would have been very difficult in the area that I saw cleared. So I see Pat's hand is up.
Yeah,
I'm calling on her next. Pat and then
Yeah.
Mandy.
Yeah, I'm actually comfortable with number and locations of trees and areas proposed for clearing. But I have a clarification. I have this area, a wooded area, and I'm going to clear 10 acres. But I'm also clearing for access roads and things like that. So would that be included in the definition here of clearing, or should it say clearing and access or whatever? I don't know.
Any clearing would be included, whether it's for access or
Gotcha.
for
Thank you.
installation. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm going to respond to the locations part of it. I mean, if you get a forester to come in, they can give you an estimate of either the board feed or the number of stumps that they'll do a stump count and they'll tell you roughly how many trees they're going to take out. I don't think it would be feasible to ask somebody to have a surveyor, GPS locate 500 trees. But we do want to know, like on an aerial plan, if the area is forested, that is going to be the field, the solar field, sort of basically what the impact is. Mandy Counselor Haneke.
A couple of questions. We had deleted this the last time we talked about it because we thought vegetation clearing above covered it, as identifying what was getting cleared. So I'm not sure why it was added back in when the committee thought to delete it. Number two, if the ZBA says 8 inches, I don't know what the ZBA wording is, and I don't know what the planning board wording is, but does this override that, or are they still going to have to count the number of trees above 8 inches because it's in the rules and regs? And if that's the case, which I actually disagree with, that they shouldn't have to, should we put something in here that overrides the rules and regulations, and can you do that in a specific instance? And third, counting trees when you word it like this is never going to be accurate, or it will be excessively expensive to do so, and that will not fly at the state level, given everything I've read about state solar bylaws, where they say any excessive costs for anything is against 40A Section 3. And so I would delete this completely, but I do have a concern about the ZBA submittal requirements and how that affects vegetation clearing and counting and what we do about that.
Yep. Chris.
So I think we should have a statement in here, perhaps towards the beginning, where we refer to the ZBA and planning board requirements, that says that the submittal requirements contained in this article override the submittal requirements contained in the ZBA and planning board rules and regulations, or supplant, or whatever the word would be.
Chris, this would be an instance of if there was such a requirement, we'd have to put something in that we're over superseding it in some way.
We're saying that the ZBA requirements say that you have to map all of the trees that are 8 inches and above. And so we don't want to have to require that for solar installations because they're so huge that it would be unduly burdensome for the applicant to have to do that. So we wanted to put something in here that says that this list of submittal requirements, if there's a conflict with the submittal requirements for either the ZBA or the planning board, the PGA, that this list overrides those other lists for purposes of solar installations.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie.
I just recall that this was one of the items that staff felt was really burdensome and also hard to for staff to verify as well. So I think when you're requiring an applicant to submit these things, there has to be some ability for staff to review and verify what's being stated on the plan. And so they thought this was something that was burdensome and potentially not, an area is one thing, but when you start talking about the number of trees and the size of trees for large areas that are likely for this type of development is too much.
And I think we have it here just so that we can talk about it because we didn't really get through that. Chris and then Kathy.
I think I've said what I had to say.
Oh, okay, Kathy.
So Mandy suggested that vegetation clearing includes trees. If we want to make sure the word tree appeared, under vegetation clearing could be comma, including trees. And the word tree would then appear.
And the site plan will show that, yeah. Jennifer.
I didn't mean to raise my hand, but I agree with Kathy. I would add, I think that's a great way to address it, because I think it is, and I agree with Mandy that the state would probably find it overly burdensome and costly to have to count every tree.
So I think why it's here and why it came back in is that the solar bylaw working group had originally to locate location, approximate height, and percent tree cover on the site at the time of the filing, with trees of a diameter at breast height of 18 for evergreen and 12-inch for deciduous trees to be identified and tallied to determine tree loss. So they were really targeting the large trees, and that's, I think, what we're that aspect of it is falling off here. Sounds like if no one objects to including trees up in the vegetative clearing, that probably covers it. Chris.
Oh, I was just going to say, what if you did, as was suggested, say what the location and size of trees over a certain size was? What would you do about it? Would you leave certain trees over a certain size in place, even though there's a solar array going around it?
No.
So I think we have to connect it with what would be the logical action that would be taken if we had this information. And I think there isn't a logical action.
And
my
just talk about
And
that was next to our solar array that was walnuts, which each time they fell would have broken the solar panels.
Mhm.
It was a big tree.
Right. Okay, let's keep going here. We have, where are we so far? So
We
it's
added
parking roads.
back in location of interconnection, including poles and wires.
Is that included in the first line that we have above there?
We didn't,
No.
we have electrical poles. You said the interconnection would be
Separate. 'Cause it's
on
separate.
public, and so that maybe it wasn't part of.
That's
there.
correct. Location of interconnections, yes, that would be offsite. And
got
number
that.
3, we've already deleted because we included that up above.
Mhm.
Number 4 seems to be important. I see this in every solar by that I look at, 1 or 3 line electrical diagram detailing where these things are located and the BESS and associated components. So that seems to be useful, necessary information.
So the red is a duplicate of what we just have
Right.
up above.
Right,
So we could take that out.
yep.
And then down below, let's see. Technical specifications. Is that a separate thing or does that relate to all of this number 5?
I'm sorry, what was your question, Chris?
It's that starts off with technical specifications, but is that really necessary here? What we want is for them to show the photovoltaic panels, the mounting system, the inverters, BESS, nameplate capacity, real reflectivity, performance history. We certainly want technical specifications, but we don't want it on the site plan. We want it somewhere else. They usually give it to us in a packet. You know, it's a big document.
So it's not on the site plan. This is a new number. Site plan was number 2.
Okay, so all right, I get it. I'm getting confused.
But
So we want technical specifications about these items so that we should have a capital T starting the word technical, and then we should have a word that connects technical specifications with the other things that are listed after that.
version 7 had a different wording completely. I don't know, so I don't know what happened here. Let me put the wording from version 7. I'm just gonna add it below.
I'm looking at the same time at numbers, the reference to number 14 and 15. 14 is a utility connection plan and an acknowledgement of application from the electric utility. 15 is a list identifying all offsite electrical system improvements necessary to the electrical grid to accommodate the power from the proposed installation and identification of what entity is paying for such improvements. Also, the identification of parties responsible for the installation, inspection and maintenance of the generation tie line, if, i.e., electrical connection to the grid.
I think they're duplicative.
That's
Um,
why
the
we're
interconnection-
asking is, should they be part of 5?
Well, but 4 already requires the electrical diagram and 2 already requires the interconnection. But we can talk about that when we get to 14 and 15.
Yep.
Right now, it's the wording of 5.
Mandy, what did you just put in there that's yeah,
This was the wording we had in a prior version, and I'm not sure why we changed it to this other version. The prior wording seems a little clearer or more logical, and it says the same thing.
I think the important thing for any of these systems is that addition of the performance history, which the one you just inserted does not include.
Okay.
Um,
I didn't-
That
Yeah,
may, that may be particularly important for BESS. I'm not
That's
sure.
right.
Mhm.
I'm
That's
not
right.
sure it's as important for the panels themselves. So you might want to think of where performance history is applicable. And when I have questions of how and where BESS gets inserted, but that's one of the issues on storage systems and their past performance and safety.
Yep,
So,
right.
But if you ask how the panels themselves perform, it seems to be an odd thing here. So maybe these two need to be separated. BESS, in this case, the photovoltaic from BESS, if you want performance history. It's just, when I saw it, I was wondering what performance history means related to the panels, the inverters.
Chris.
So just to let Kathy know, I think what we decided, or I think we decided that we would have 2 separate sections, one for the solar arrays in general, and another section that is specific to BESS. And the reason for that is that there is always now a BESS that is associated with the solar array because it's required by the state to have that. And yet, and so that BESS would accommodate the electricity that's generated by the solar installation. And then there are these BESS installations that are separate. They're not connected to a specific solar panel installation. And those are much bigger and more, probably have more problems. So we decided to put that in a separate section, just to let Kathy know. So these BESS that we're talking about here are going to be the ones that are a component of a solar array and not a standalone, I
Okay.
believe. I believe that's
That
what we
makes it
intended.
clear. And the way Mandy just worded the performance history addresses what I was saying, that we particularly want, if there's BESS, performance history of BESS, rather than of each of the panels, the mounting system, the inverters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
If
Good.
people are okay with-
And I'm going to put a little alert out that it's just about 5:30. And we don't have a whole lot. We have a couple of meeting minutes. And we want to look at the calendar for 2025 and also talk about planning board and ZBA selection criteria and just the process. So I'm looking for a reasonable cutoff point on this, and this has been very productive because we're finally getting through it. Thoughts, Chris?
Gosh, we have kind of a ways to go.
Yeah.
Looking at Chris's memo, I think we can get through at least 10.
Yeah, let's try.
Good. Okay.
All right. So 9, we
But
decided
we're on
to
6, right?
6, sorry. 6, we decided to delete because it's already included up above, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We require proposed wattage. Yep.
And 7, we already included that up above.
Yep.
And 8, we don't necessarily know who the installer is going to be at this time when they submit their application, because they, unless they work with a particular installer, they may have to put this out to bid to, have a number of installers submit a proposal. So we don't know who the installer is necessarily. So I think that that's not a useful thing to ask for. The 9, we said we would delete that because it's already a requirement of the application of the zoning board of appeals, the PGA. For everything, you have to submit that information. And then number 10, the same thing. It's already part of the application. So you don't really need that as a specific submittal.
I'm
So
going to take a quick question from Kathy. You have your hand up.
No, sorry, I don't. It
Oh,
never
okay.
went down. It didn't expire.
do you want to stop there?
I'd like to go one more.
No, I like this, Chris, because I'm seeing most of the others say keep. This is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go. Number 11.
11, documentation of actual or prospective access and control of the project site sufficient to allow for construction and operation of the proposed installation. Now, access and roads are one thing, but the legal access that an applicant may have to the site is very important. The ZBA or the PGA will want to know that the applicant actually has the ability to go on the site and do what he's proposing to do. So that's what this refers to. It's not referring to a road, either just,
Okay.
it's referring to, do you have the ability to go on the site and do what you're proposing?
So,
Okay.
so it's literally about the site plans. It doesn't, like fire access would be elsewhere because, or that would be part of the plan.
This is really literally a legal access that the.
Gotcha.
applicant
Can
is
we add the word legal?
Oh, I'm comfortable. I bet you they know.
I think since it
Control of
goes
the
within
project.
control of project site,
Yeah,
That's right. Exactly.
it makes sense.
Do we need the word legal, like legal control of the project site, or
I don't think
it's,
so. I think
No.
that's a
Yeah,
general
okay,
accepted term. Okay, 11. What's the next one? Plan.
12.
A plan for the operation and maintenance of the installation, including battery storage and annual training for emergency responders. That I think is very important. It's something that the PGA would ask for. And someone had brought up the legality of requiring annual training for emergency responders. I asked Chris Bascom about this, and he said, oh, yes, it's definitely needed. And, I think that the proponents or applicants are willing to do this because they are happy to have emergency responders help them to deal with problems. So I don't think they are going to be withholding annual training. And I guess
Yeah.
you could potentially have a lawsuit to say, well, you shouldn't require that because it's not legal, but I think it's kind of part of the
yes,
whole package.
okay, Counselor Haneke.
So the town cannot require a property owner to pay for training the responders. I'm not disputing that our emergency responders will need training, but it is part of the taxes everyone pays. It can't be required separately. The AG in everything it's written about solar bylaws that have had paying for annual training has
doesn't-
flat out said it's illegal to
It
require
doesn't say that.
the owner to pay for it. And I guess my question with this annual training plan is, why are we having each owner of LGPI create a plan for training our emergency responders?
Because they
Shouldn't
all have
our
different-
emergency responders create their own plan?
They all have different
makes no
types of
sense to
equipment.
me.
And that the training is related to the specific type of equipment that's proposed and installed. So it's not the same for everyone. It's not like a cookie cutter thing where fire department is going to get a training that is applicable to every single installation. So my understanding is that the applicants are usually amenable to somehow providing training for emergency responders for their particular type of installation.
And there-
Usually they have a
I would,
guide
I
with
would add, for instance, in a new building, you have a complicated ventilation HVAC system, and the contractor actually trains the people that are going to be managing it.
But it's
And it's
not a
something, it's like,
requirement of building the building to include that plan that can change every year. I mean, this is a plan for annual training. Number two, I will fight this one, but it also doesn't belong in number 12. If you're gonna put it in, it needs to be a separate thing because it has nothing to do with operation and maintenance of LGPI or BES. It's different. And to conflate it with the plan for operation and maintenance of LGPI to me is wrong, but do we, when we build the 5-story buildings, has ZBA required a plan for training emergency responders on how to respond to a fire in a 5-story building? No.
so let's
If our
make a
fire
note.
departments require, they have to plan their own annual training. How do I know they need they need training, maybe it needs to be annually, maybe it doesn't, but how am I to create the plan for when the fire department does it? How do you even submit a plan? I guess I don't understand how you could even comply with this when it's a municipal department and you can't, as an owner, say you're going to follow my plan for training and put it as part of the special permit allowance,
Okay, this is a
requirement?
good discussion. Typically, again, if you build something, you must provide the operation, the O&M plan. You provide the document. Part of that is sometimes walking the technicians through what buttons they're going to have to push, or what is an issue with that particular product. So let's table this. Let's make a note of your concern. And I think we draw a line here so that we can get the rest of the agenda done. Good discussion, and maybe we'll have a little bit more information next time. Chris?
I was just gonna say that, I think that we could look into this. Maybe I could get more information from Chris Bascom and find out, how this works, actually. And this particular, submittal requirement doesn't say that you have to pay for it. It
Right.
just
Mhm.
says that you have a plan. So
Right,
maybe it
right.
says something like, the applicant will work with the fire department to create a plan to come up with an emergency response, or something like that. So, but it's a
And
thing
Chris,
that.
if you ask, it could also be, if we had it be, and safety provisions or something like that, because I know there was a lot of discussion again by the installation up by us on keys to the gates and where they could come, and for particular provisions for being able to get fire trucks onto the property,
Mm.
and size of the gates.
Right. So that requires some collaboration.
There was, it was,
Or-
it was a really important feature. They had to be wide enough, and there had to be a way to get there. And the
Right.
gates were otherwise locked for some of these, yeah.
Thank you. And thanks, Chris. Thank you, Stephanie. I don't see your face right here, but appreciate that. So we make a note that we'll start with number 12 next time, or number 11, whatever.
Thank you,
Well,
Dave,
number 12.
also.
And of course, I always say thanks to Dave, but he's going to stick around longer probably, unless he wants to just turn over the co-hosting and get out of his cave.
Okay, I must say, I'm really glad that we finally got to this, so thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
meeting. Thank you.
We've been tangling you along forever.
Thank you, and both of you
Thank-
very much, Stephanie and Chris.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. I just wanted to note, Pam, that I won't be here for the next meeting, but I will
Okay.
get that response from Erin, and I will get it to Dave and Chris, so you have it. for the next
Wonderful.
meeting.
The other, as you're leaving here, the other item that we had put in the packet was a suggestion from Pat DeAngelis on another section, which is hazardous materials. And so we obviously need to discuss that next time because we did not get to it today.
Well, there's so much, it would be nice.
Yeah,
There's so much to still discuss.
yeah.
Good night.
So thank you all. Appreciate it very much. I see a hand in the audience, and we did say that we might have the opportunity to allow people to speak from on this topic. Anybody feel uncomfortable with doing that? Pat, you're saying something, but you're muted.
I'm actually not muted, I don't think,
Oh,
but let's just be, it's fine, but let's keep it tight because we,
yeah, absolutely. We have lots to do.
whoever it is.
Liz, we're gonna let you in, and you've got 2 minutes, because we really need to move on to something else on the topic of solar bylaw.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry. I'm in a different time zone here. My name is Nick Shaw. I've taught environmental science at the high school here in town for 27 years. I've been reading over the bylaw. Obviously, this is of interest to me, and I want to say thank you all for the immense amount of work you've done. I know that these things are not easy. I do have some concerns about the no cutting clause in the critical forest and core forest language that appears in the bylaw. I think it's about the middle of the potential bylaw. And the reason that I have those feelings is that we've done a lot of work in this area at the high school, also with professional ecologists. And using figures that are widely available in the discipline, we know that if we completely covered the town with trees, given our present day carbon emissions, we would only be able to absorb about 11% of those emissions. So the trees are really not going to be the thing that saves us here. The issue is that we have an awful lot of carbon dioxide going into the environment, and we need to address that. And I know that some feel that if we lose the trees, we lose sequestration, but lumber is a great place to put carbon, lasts a long time. And as far as absorption is concerned, we would lose the photosynthesis of those whatever 40 acres or so. But the amount of photosynthesis that it would then result in absorbing carbon dioxide is only about 10, 13% of what we could prevent by preventing the carbon back into the atmosphere in the first place by using widespread green energy. In short, our solar panels will prevent 9 times as much as those forests can pull out. So as far as drawdown is concerned, which is the really critical piece, we need to be thinking about no longer flooding the atmosphere with our carbon dioxide, which even if we had all the trees covering every square inch of town, we wouldn't have a prayer of absorbing anyway. And I think we want to be cautious not to get caught up in more of an aesthetic argument or an argument about biodiversity, because even though biodiversity is important, and I'm well versed in habitat fragmentation and things like that, the reality is if we don't put the brakes on the carbon in a big way, then even if we have a large piece of core habitat, it's just going to be increasingly more subject to forest fires, droughts, insect infestation, storm damage, and things like that. And then the size doesn't really matter. So, I'm happy to discuss any of these values and figures that have been used to derive all these conclusions. I've been at it for a couple of decades now and went through all of these calculations with a PhD forest ecologist. If anybody's interested at all, you can reach me at my email. It's SHAWN, 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 @arps.org, Amherst Regional Public Schools.org. And again, I'd be happy to go over any details and allow folks to poke all the holes they want into it. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you calling in. I think it would be appropriate if you wanted to write up what you wanted to share in more detail, and you can email all town councilors, or you can email the 5 of us that are on this committee, and we would appreciate getting that from you. So thank you.
All right, happy to do it, and thank you.
Take care. Okay. Agenda item CRC calendar. Let's pull that up. Did I include it? Proposed CRC meeting calendar. Did anyone have
It's
any
in the packet.
concerns? Yep, it's in the packet. If people had any issue, it's typically, we agreed that it would be the 2nd and 4th Thursdays. The only conflicts that we might bump into are actually Thanksgiving Day itself and Christmas Day itself. And given the timing and the number of Thursdays in a month, we could actually continue on an every other week schedule by adopting November 6th and November 20, then December 4 and December 18 as the alternatives to the 2nd and 4th Thursdays. Kathy.
I didn't look at it closely, Pam, but the other suggestion that I'll throw out is you could meet just once that month. So depending on what you think the workload is, rather than shifting, but I'm happy to do either. So you're saying shift the 2nd and 4th to a 1st and 3rd. So the alternative is miss one of those.
Right. And or have some back to back. I mean, if we missed.
So I have no other opinion.
Mandy, Councilor Haneke.
I would just shift them both. It's always possible we won't need it depending on what's referred, but it is the end of the term. And I just remember some of the last end of terms being tight for CRC.
Yep.
Although the first one was tight for CRC, the second one was not, I don't believe. So I would keep them for now. We might find ourselves not having anything referred to us because it's the end of term and we might be able to cancel them, but I'd rather have 2 per month just in case we're trying to get through stuff before the end of the term.
So can I double check then, make sure I understand exactly what you are agreeing to or disagreeing to, what dates do you want in November? Do you want the 13th or the 6th?
I would do your shifts as suggested in red.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
okay,
the 6,
okay,
24 and 18.
okay. Thank you, okay. Can I get a motion?
I think we could just agree to it, right?
Well, we have to take a motion. Let's vote on it and then we give our proposed calendar
I'll
to
move to
Athena.
adopt the calendar with the suggested November and December dates as amended or presented. I'm not sure
Or
which one.
Suggested, yeah.
Seconds. Kathy second,
Let's, second, okay, Kathy,
yes.
we're voting. Jennifer,
Yes.
Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Pat DeAngelis,
Aye.
and Pam Rooney's an aye. Good, that's done. I will forward that to Athena and she can make it official. The other item that I was hoping to cover, just thinking about most of us, except Kathy, have been through this cycle of interviewing ZBA and planning board members. And one of the reasons that I ended up writing that memo to make some adjustments in either our policy or the citizen activity form is that we typically ask people to have an active CAF in our possession after our bulletin board announcement has been made and posted. And so it occurred to me that we could be really proactive. We can get our bulletin board announcement out now or soon and have that gate open. And then any CAF that comes in after that point is like golden instead of having to do it a couple of times. Any discussion on that beautiful idea? Jennifer?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was confusing and streamlining it. I mean, we were asking people to do so much previously that I think some people, well, dropped off. That may not have been the reason, but I think streamlining it and making it clearer, it was a little confusing, and having consistent processes across the different forms, what's actually written on the form and when it has to be posted. So I think that was very helpful and I would support that.
Counselor Haneke?
So that proposal was referred to GOL, not us. So I'm not sure why we would be discussing the proposal itself here versus starting the.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not discussing the proposal. I'm just saying, thinking about the reason for me wanting to do the proposal is because we want CAFs to come in after the posted bulletin board notice. We could avoid this altogether if we did a bulletin board notice posting early, say in March.
If you present, I would recommend you present a draft bulletin board notice to us at the next meeting so that we can approve it so it can be posted.
I will do it.
That would
for
help
both.
GOL as well.
Not the
mean,
draft bulletin
ZBA.
board notice, ZBA and
ZBA.
planning board. Yeah.
I will give you drafts for posting and I'll bring them both to the next meeting, which is next week. Great, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. I just was not sure if there was a reason to not do it early. Jennifer?
Do we know how many vacancies there'll be on each of those PGAs?
I'll bring that information. It's a matter of just looking it up. There are several ZBAs just because there are several year
Alternates for the
appointments.
1 year.
Yeah. So we know we're getting them anyway, and I think there are 2 people on the planning board also that finish up in 2025. Good. I'll do that for next week. Let's look at meeting minutes, please. We have 3 meeting minutes to approve. And we'll start with April 30. Are there any additions, corrections? Speaking of ZBA, this was our ZBA interview evening of April 30th, 2024.
I don't think I've ever seen minutes where they've had every question and answer, so
I
someone was
have
very thorough.
never- I have never. We might talk about, do we want that level of detail?
That level of detail is not necessary
I
Yeah.
agree.
under open meeting law.
Should- Right.
Yeah.
You can listen to the tape of the, meeting, recording of the meeting.
So we could save the note taker a lot of time by allowing some consolidation. Okay, I'll pass that along as well. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept this very detailed set?
I move that we accept the minutes of the April 30th, 2024 CRC meeting.
Second, DeAngelis.
Let's take a vote. Kathy? Okay. Jennifer?
Yes.
Pat?
Aye.
Counselor Haneke?
Aye.
Pam Rooney's an aye. So that was 4:30. Thank you. The next one is January 14, 2025. Any additions, any corrections? So just so Kathy knows, once these are approved, they get dated. It says minutes approved on whatever date in the header or the footer. And then they go into our meeting minutes folder in our SharePoint. And they also get sent to Athena to post on the public page, whatever. Any motion here? Pam will make a motion. I move to approve the meeting minutes of January 14, 2025. Is there a second?
Second, DeAngelis.
Take a vote. Pat?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Kathy Shane?
Abstain.
Counselor Haneke?
Aye.
And Pam is an aye. So 4-1. Thank you. And the last one must be CRC minutes for April 2, 2024. Any corrections, additions? Any motions?
I move to accept the minutes of April 4, 2024. Second. No, thank you, Jennifer. April 2nd, 2024. Jennifer seconds.
Second, yeah.
Let's take a vote. Let's see. Jennifer?
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis?
Aye. Aye. Excuse me.
Pam Rooney's an aye. Counselor Haneke?
Aye.
Kathy Shane?
Abstain.
We're gonna get a lot of 2024, just so you're aware. Okay,
One of the
thank you.
things that can happen is that the minutes can be designated to somebody for a single person or shared to be reviewed. So particularly, I believe Athena talked about that.
I'm sorry,
And
Pat, say it-
GOL, and one of the things I had been asked to do was review at the end of 2023, review all the GOL minutes that were outstanding, and I forgot, so I recently did them. And so in it is possible to share them out. And then one person is saying, yes, I approve these minutes. But there's some with ones that are so old, it seems reasonable to do that. And I also, as a side, Kathy, even though you haven't been, this always intrigued me. This was in our first year, I think we heard this. Even if you haven't been at a meeting and you don't know anything that happened, but you've read through the minutes, you can vote on them or not, or abstain. No problem about abstaining. I'm not saying that. I'm
No,
just,
and Pat, I agree with that, but having not been there and not willing to spend the time watching your Zoom meeting, I feel
yeah.
like I have literally no idea. So, but on designating, we've done alternatives on finance, but I think it works good designating someone as a reviewer, including a set, and then voting them as a block. And
Yeah.
the question is, you have to trust that the reviewer is willing to cross-check with the Zoom that that's actually what happened, because sometimes the minutes you get are not quite right, and in
Right.
finance, it's a confusion of, was it chapter 70 or chapter 90, or was it charter school? I mean, the words, the minute taker didn't distinguish correctly.
Yeah.
And then when you're reviewing it, there's nothing wrong with the word. It just wasn't the right word. Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
why I was suggesting sharing it out between the 5 of us, so.
yeah.
We could look for volunteers at the next meeting. The next
Won't all
agenda
jump at once.
next preview. Obviously, we're going to keep going with the solar bylaw, made good progress tonight. I did reach out to Nate to see, and I haven't heard back from him, but he seemed willing to give us a short update on the ADUs and just where we stand, what planning board has been working through at this point, just to keep us up to speed. Are there any other previews, any other agenda items that we should be including? Oh, well, we'll have, what do you call it? Bulletin board wording for ZBA and planning board. It's just for my own notes. Kathy?
So I have a question just on solar, since I'm coming in later, but with fresh eyes. If I have some questions or comments that are big picture, such as cross-checking with the state law on the definition of large solar versus our definition of large, can I just write them in a memo and then bring it to the committee next time? I don't want to put it in a packet without discussion. So it's items like that. And Pat, I asked in passing today on how big a section here are we going to do on BESS, knowing that there'll be a freestanding, and how do we
Right.
indicate, so I have some basic structural questions like that,
Yeah.
and some organizational ones. So if I do it with fresh eyes, looking at what is a pretty messy V8, version 8, but what I'm doing is going back to the very first version that came to you from the committee, looking at Chris's notes and then some of yours, but I was just going to bring that, rather, it's not line item at all. It's bigger picture. So I would bring it, my suggestions, I would just bring it as a memo and speak to it rather than put it in the packet. So I wouldn't be having a conversation with all of you before you saw it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, Kathy. Thank you. What I was gonna
I'm talking
say-
about maybe one page or one and a, or.
Yeah, but sometimes it's still better if when you bring it, you could find a way, I don't know how you do this technically, but share it while you're talking about it so we can see it.
Oh, yeah, no, I can
That
do
can
it
happen.
share,
Yeah.
and we can put it in the packet right away as soon as I'm speaking to it. I mean, these are questions rather than suggestions on what to change, so.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good idea. So bring your memo. Happy to have it. David?
I need a little, excuse me, little refresher coming off the flu and out of the haze here. Where is BESS? I mean, BESS is referenced in the current draft, but where does BESS stand relative to a referral? Did the council
It hasn't,
refer it? It hasn't
It
been
has not.
referred.
yeah,
No.
Okay, that's what I
staff
thought.
has worked on it and.
I know that. Yeah, that's where I was
Yeah.
kind of going. I made a note to check in with Christine on that. But so really until CRC gets that referral from the council, BESS isn't squarely on your plate, on your radar screen.
Yeah, it needs to be
So-
included.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and another
Temporarily.
short answer is that we recognized that at the time that we might want a very separate BESS, a standalone BESS, but we needed to, in the meantime, include it as reference when we're talking about LGPI. As somebody said today, it always is coming with some sort of BES. So we need to include BES and cover it in the submittals and requirements and
But Bess could come to the council either from the planning board or staff at any time.
Yes, but not having anything in, look how long, we still don't even have a solar bylaw. I don't think most people are gonna fight about BES, but to not have some reference to it and some
Oh, yeah.
requirement in the
Totally
basic
agree.
solar bylaw would be a mistake. I don't think,
Yeah.
it's not this heavy-handed
I
detail.
just don't want you to get bored, Pat. That's all. I want to line more things up to come.
I'm only
to
bored when
you.
we get to the very end and I want everybody, including myself, to condense their speech.
All right. We will talk
any
about
questions,
that.
just write us if you
Thanks,
want.
Dave.
There are no announcements, nothing anticipated 48 hours in advance, and I think at 6:02, I would like to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn. I move to adjourn.
Second,
Let's go, Pat DeAngelis.
No, aye.
Pam Rooney's an aye. Counselor Haneke,
Hi.
Kathy Shane.
yes.
Did I do Jennifer?
No, but yes.
Okay, good. Dave, thank you as always.
Yes, thanks. Take
Okay,
care,
I'm glad
everyone.
you're
better.
feeling a little better from the flu. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks.